Hi, I'm Dennis Lyons, the editor of the Daily Item, and we're here today in one of our candidate interview sessions leading up to the November 3rd election. Our candidate with us today is Katie Evans, who is running against David Rowe in the State House 85th District race. Katie is a Democrat, and just because you're sort of new on the political scene, at least to us here, would you mind just tell us a little bit about your background and your past experience in politics?
Well, my past experience in politics really is as from a point of observation rather than participation. I've never run for office before, unless you want to go back to when I was in high school and ran for student council.
So what brought you to run this time?
What brought me to run this time was the realization, first of all, that David Rowe was running unopposed. And I think that sends several wrong messages. One of them being that the assumption, if there's no opponent, that everything is just wonderful and everybody is happy. And I wasn't sensing that. I also think that because of the disparity in voter registration in the 85th between Republicans and Democrats, that a lot of people say, well, a Democrat just can't win around here, so, why bother? And I just felt strongly enough that the people of the 85th, first of all, should have a choice. And secondly, that I'd like to show that a Democrat can win in the 85th.
Okay, so what are you hearing when you're out and about? Are you obviously, because of COVID, the campaign
Yeah,
has
I'm
gotta
not
be
out and
different.
about too often.
Yeah.
What I hear mostly, and we've done some phone banking, we've done some contacts with voters, and what I'm hearing is that a lot of people are not impressed with the representation that they've been getting in the past year, and that they are looking for someone who is, first of all, I think, willing to listen to their concerns with an open mind and take their real concerns into consideration when being in Harrisburg representing them.
Okay. Well, your opponent has been one of the more vocal critics of Governor Tom Wolf's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic by state government, has even called for his impeachment. So simply put, how do you think Pennsylvania has done from state leadership to county and local officials to the state health department? How do you view the reaction to this and the way that it's been handled by our state leaders?
Okay, I guess I'll start at the top with Governor Wolf. I think that based on the knowledge that existed or continues to exist, but the knowledge that existed at the time, I think he did the most prudent, though some people think it was very draconian, but I think he did the very best he could to try to protect the health and the welfare of the people of Pennsylvania.
Okay. And as far as the legislature is concerned?
As far as the legislature is concerned, I seem to feel, or at least see, that they're more intent on criticizing the governor and everything that he does, rather than coming up with any kind of solution or help or action. Their legislation is all directed at fighting against the governor. I think they need to start fighting for the people of Pennsylvania and their health.
One of the big issues that has seemed to have gotten a lot of attention from the state legislature is, and even our U.S. Senator Toomey the other day, is how many people get to go to a football game. Just to be fair, I wrote a column about this a couple of weeks ago, basically saying that I thought we were spending too much time on that, and that there are more important issues to be dealing with. But doesn't matter what I think. What do you think?
Well, I do agree with you. I think our first concern, should have been and has been, and I think the school districts have been doing an excellent job in taking care of our kids who have gone back to school. I think I just saw this morning that the NFL game is canceled on Sunday between maybe the Steelers, I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
that's right. Mm-hmm.
because of an outbreak of COVID among the team. And so I think that we need to concentrate on keeping people safe. And I understand, for example, the desire of parents. If you see your kid playing in a game or being in a play or doing anything that's going to essentially have parental support, is a good thing. But when we see people, for example, who are attending these games and they're not necessarily social distancing, they're not wearing masks, they're just not showing, I think, the proper concern for not just their own kids, but the parents of other kids. And so I really do think that there are just so many other things that really need the attention of the legislature.
And one of the things that I've brought up in previous conversations at this table in the last couple of weeks is helping parents deal with the fact that their kids may have to be being schooled at home while they are trying to maintain their jobs, and there's a dearth of childcare. I think I read
Yes.
just yesterday, like more than 200 childcare institutions have shut down.
That's right. Yes. One of the things that I've been doing in my campaign is a Saturday morning coffee with Katie. And one of the subjects of one of my early ones was on, early childhood education and childcare. And as businesses have opened, for example, parents don't know what they're going to do with their children because there's not childcare available. And so, I think that's a continuing problem. The other problem, when you mention children being at home and needing to go to school, that a lot of places in Western and Western Snyder County, Western Union County, don't have reliable broadband.
Right.
I know that I think it's the United Way, has sponsored some mobile broadband units, and I just saw that the Union County libraries are going to have mobile hotspots so that people can come in, check them out for a week, use them for the whole family, no charge, because we also have the problem if and when broadband really does become widely accessible, it's not inexpensive. And so we also need to look at the affordability.
Okay. Go to you, Rick.
Sure. Ms. Evans, let's talk about healthcare.
Call me Katie, please.
Okay.
Everyone does,
All right. You
except my
support-
mother.
Okay. Understood. You support the Prescription Drug Affordability Act,
Yes.
which would establish a bipartisan committee to
Yes.
investigate high-cost drugs.
Exactly.
How would that impact voters in the 85th? And what other healthcare issues would you be focused on in Harrisburg?
Okay, where to start? All right, I'll deal with the Prescription Affordability Act first. And, what we've seen with prescriptions is, for example, the example of insulin. It's gone up, I think, 4 times over the last 10 years. The same is true of what are called EpiPens. which now cost, I think, over $100, which are life-saving devices that people who are allergic to things like bee stings or peanuts literally need to live. So I think when you have a bipartisan group, and I would hope, as it is in some other states, the bipartisan group is made up of not just citizens, but scientists, doctors, nurses, and representatives, or at least one, from pharmaceutical companies. And they seem to work in other states. And so I think, the models are out there for us to follow. And I think that there needs to be an impact on the cost of prescription drugs, especially since not everyone has insurance. Or if they do have insurance, it may not adequately cover the portion of the prescription that makes it affordable.
So what other healthcare issue would you be focused on in Harrisburg?
Well, I think the first one that probably would still be a problem for us is COVID. I think that we need to continue to practice the safe recommendations from the CDC. And I think that the other problem that we would have locally, aside from COVID, is we had one of our major hospitals close. And so we're fortunate to have a hospital in Union County and, of course, over in Montour County. But again, for people in the western end of both those counties, you're having to travel a good distance in order to get to health care, especially in an emergency situation. And so I think that we need to perhaps do something in terms of a satellite care center somewhere that would be more easily accessible. The other concern that I have is about veterans. We have VA facilities, but again, they are a distance away. And so in many cases, our veterans are older. And so we don't have public transportation. We do have, I believe it's Rabbit, that will, take people to appointments and things like that. But again, we don't have the infrastructure in terms of things like transportation to make healthcare easily accessible to the folks in the 85th.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm going to add one more thing, and that is a lot of the people, perhaps in the 85th, don't know that as of November 1st, the insurance marketplace from the state will be up and running. And so cost, of course, is another problem with healthcare. And especially with COVID, people losing jobs. Many people get their insurance through their jobs or with their jobs. So we're going to have people who are not able to get insurance, for example, through their job. And so the marketplace will at least give folks access to information, first of all, and cost, and allow them to do some comparisons. And the statistics that I saw not too long ago actually were indicating that people participating through the marketplace would actually see a decrease in their insurance premiums, which is unheard of at this time.
Katie, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Okay?
I wanted to circle back because you mentioned as a very important issue broadband,
Yes.
and it was on our agenda as well.
Okay.
The digital divide between
Oh.
those who have and those who have almost nothing is huge.
Yes.
So there are many technical solutions to this, a lot of electronic stuff, but let's just say, what kind of priority do you think that this should have in government? If you went to Harrisburg, what priority would you put on solving this problem? Would it be something that perhaps taxpayers would share in the cost?
I would not have any difficulties with that because I actually look now at something like broadband the way I look at electricity. It's no longer a luxury. It is now something that people need in order not just to stay connected with friends or Facebook, but we now have things like telemedicine. We're talking about the difficulty of accessibility and distance, so that you can have a doctor's appointment in your own home. But if you don't have broadband, you don't have that. And so if taxpayer funds need to be used to get everybody wired up, then I would very definitely support that.
I want to circle back. We talked about the legislature a little bit. There's been a little bit of an argument down in Harrisburg about the governor's emergency powers in terms
Yes.
of emergency declaration. He's extended the declaration, I think, 3 times now, so we're in our 3rd or 4th 90-day window. Do you think the governor has used his emergency powers effectively? Has he overreached? Or what are your opinions on how he's handled this?
I think based on the metrics that he uses, for example, in terms of number of outbreaks per county, I think that his decisions are at least based on fact. Whether I think the best measure of whether it was overreach or not is how effective was it? Because I think what we're seeing as more places open up or more people decide to disregard the basic safeguards of wearing a mask, for example, we're seeing increases. And so I cannot argue that it has had a terrible effect on the economy of Pennsylvania and on the economy of the 85th, especially in restaurants and hospitality. And those are often the workers who are lower on the wage scale to begin with. And so I think that I acknowledge that the impact has been devastating for some businesses. But I think once we can get past this, then our focus needs to be on reinstituting and essentially, if you want to use the word rescue, because our workers are the lifeblood of our economy. And so the more people we have working, the better the economy is, the better the services are that the government will provide in things all across the spectrum.
And now a complete 180. Election reform. I read on your website that you say the 85th is fractured at best because, the northern parts go to the 84th and not all of Snyder County's in it and things like that.
Exactly.
You say you support a nonpartisan citizen group to have the responsibility of creating the districts that are fair and equitable.
Yes.
It seems like it would be a popular opinion unless you're in Harrisburg.
Well, I think that I don't understand why it isn't a popular opinion in Harrisburg. Because I think that fair representation is a basis for a democracy. And I think that when you have essentially legislators picking their constituents instead of constituents picking their legislators, that you're subverting the whole idea of representation and democracy.
Okay.
Brett, sir?
Education, you mentioned that you'll lead an effort to more fairly fund schools in Pennsylvania. Can you explain what you believe the flaws are, what you would do to correct those?
Okay. I will, for all transparency, I don't know if you've looked at my biography. I was a public school teacher for 17 years. And when I left there, I left to work for the Pennsylvania State Education Association. And I was a field rep. And I negotiated contracts, answered 8 million questions about school code, retirement, anything A to Z. And one of the things that I did was a special assignment as a witness in Act 88 arbitrations and fact findings on school finance. And so I have a pretty broad knowledge of school financing and school budgets. And so I think also that investment in education is the smartest investment that any government or any society can make. And so I think we need to look at the tax code. We need to look at how we fund our services. And we're definitely stymied by and I'm trying to remember the exact word, a clause in the Constitution that basically says we can't have a graduated income tax. Uniformity. And so, obviously, though the current legislature seems to be real happy about amending the Constitution for all sorts of things, I don't see that amending the Constitution to create a different tax system would be something that would be easily undertaken, and I'm not sure how it would work. I'm not an economist at this point.
Would you favor
But-
taking property taxes out of the equation?
I think it would be very good to have property taxes taken out of the equation. There was time that the Pennsylvania, that the state funded 50% of education costs. That's now down, I think, in the 30% range. And so the less that comes from Harrisburg, the more that has to come from local pocketbooks. And Pennsylvania has a really high disparity in school funding between what the highest districts get and what the highest number of dollars, the lowest number of dollars. And so that's not equitable. One of the things that I think we could look at is the corporate income tax in Pennsylvania. And if you look, a lot of our businesses, our corporations actually, are not incorporated in Pennsylvania. They're incorporated in Delaware. So it's called essentially the Delaware loophole. And so they pay minimal corporate taxes to the state of Pennsylvania. And I think closing the Delaware loophole would have two effects. Number one, it would bring in more revenue to the state of Pennsylvania. And secondly, from things that I have seen, it actually could result in lowering the corporate income tax when everybody's paying his or her fair share. And the burden, essentially, that the corporate income tax takes on smaller businesses could also that way be alleviated, because the smaller businesses do pay their fair share. And in effect, when you look at what corporations are paying, they're paying more than their fair share.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, good. Now let's move on to something completely different.
Okay.
One of our
You
favorite.
want to talk about
one
gardening
of our-
or
One of our favorite
Cooking.
favorite topics of the Lieutenant Governor of the fine Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is the legalization of recreational
marijuana?
We've had obviously medical marijuana legalized in the last several years, and this obviously next step has been done in several states. It's been considered in several other states, including neighboring states like New Jersey and New York. Where do you stand on that possibility?
I am in favor of it. And I'm in favor of it. In fact, I've been in favor of it since the 1970s and 1980s, when I've recognized the ability to generate a great deal of tax money. Well, my thought was, legalize it and tax it. One effect that it also would have by taking away the criminalization of marijuana for recreational use is it gets rid of the black market. So it cuts down on some law enforcement problems. And the amount that could be generated could certainly be used for many things. In fact, I think that Governor Wolf did make a proposal to legalize recreational marijuana and floated it, I guess, to the legislature. And the head of the state Senate, whose name escapes me at the moment, indicated that they had a lot more to do this session, and it certainly would not be entertained at the present time. And I think that's a bit short-sighted.
Being involved in education as much as you have been, any concerns about, the availability of legalized recreational marijuana to young people?
I think it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to control. Because right now, I'm sure any kid in Sunbury, Selinsgrove, Middleburg, who wants marijuana is going to find it. And this way, at least, you're not going to have the problem that you have had with opiates, for example, which have been other things added to them. And so you're going to have essentially a product that is unadulterated when you're controlling it. Mm-hmm. And you have controlled distribution. And so I think it would actually help, I think, perhaps cut down on access, anyway, by young folks.
I can't remember who it was. This is the fourth or fifth of these we've had. It may have been Senator Gordner said one of his concerns about it was almost the opposite of what you said, that the black market would actually grow because people don't want to, they're not going to want to pay their taxes on it if they can find the guy on the corner that you were talking about.
Oh, well, I guess I hadn't even thought about that. I guess because I'm basically a pretty honest tax-paying person. And so I didn't think about the black market actually growing. But Senator Gordner might be right. We don't know. And so, yeah, just had not thought about that.
Katie, let's talk about the minimum wage. You're in favor of increasing it, if I understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so you said that $7.25 an hour is simply not enough to support a family, even in places where costs are relatively low.
Mm-hmm.
What are voters, including businesses, saying to you about that, and what should the minimum wage be?
Okay, I have not heard a lot of feedback on my, wanting to raise the minimum wage, except maybe from some people who thought it was a bad idea. I think my opponent. But between Snyder and Union County, we have between a 10 and 12% poverty rate. This was before COVID. And we also have people in poverty who are working. They're not in poverty because they're sitting at home. But they're working at jobs. For example, a $7.25 an hour job, if you work 40 hours a week, just misses qualifying you for Medicaid. And so if you're that close to not even, if you're that close to being eligible for Medicaid, how can you pay your living costs, buy health insurance, provide your own transportation to get to a job? You simply can't. And if you have one dependent or two dependents, then you are in poverty. And a lot of the minimum wage is for service workers, especially, again, I'll go back to restaurant workers. I worked my way through college as a waitress, and I know that I think the minimum wage for tipped workers is something like $3 in some sense, with the supposition that the difference will be made up to at least $7.25 in tips. And as I pointed out, you barely subsist on $7.25 an hour. It would be a gradual increase. Not going to zip right up to $12 an hour or something like that. The states around us have all upped their minimum wage, and so
So what do you say?
there's competition for.
So what do you say to the
to this-
person who argues, and around here in particular,
Oh yeah.
if you, there are many places that are not paying $7.25, department stores, even grocery stores, what have you, are not paying the minimum wage, and that the market itself can take care of paying a higher wage. Why make it a government requirement?
I think that at least having a government requirement sets a floor. And so it gives people just a little bit more that they can really put back into the economy. And so I guess that there are some legislators who feel that the government really should just kind of get out of everybody's way and not have any sort of things like, a minimum wage. I think we do need a minimum wage, mainly because not all employers, unfortunately, or fortunately, I think they're probably in the minority, who will pay the least that they can and have no qualms about it.
What would your minimum wage be? What
Oh.
period of time, what would your time frame be?
Oh,
Where would you
probably
end up?
over 4-5 years. It would depend, and it would depend on the economy.
Do you
If,
have a number that you're kind of shooting for over 5 years?
oh, having no idea what the cost of living might be in 5 years, it would be a pure guess. $12, $13, maybe as high as 15 if things are booming. But I think it has to be gradual.
Okay, who's next?
I think that was all I had on our list. Unless you
Okay,
guys
well,
want-
I got a couple more.
Good.
Okay.
I didn't want to step on anybody's toes.
Yep.
You're running for election in an interesting, they used to say may you live in interesting times was a curse. These are interesting times. Mail-in voting. There's been a lot of back and forth in the state over how that should proceed. Right now, most recently, there's been movement to allow votes that come in postmarked election day but don't physically get to the
Right, for
county
3 days.
offices for 3 days to allow them to be counted. So that's been done. There's some movement right now to allow the votes that come in early to be voted before.
Oh, to be counted before, yeah,
Election day.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on mail-in absentee voting? There's a lot of people. One of whom was on national television last night.
Yes,
who,
fraud.
who think it's rife with possibility of fraud. So what are your thoughts on the mail-in voting and anything that should change in the current law that we have in Pennsylvania?
Okay, well, I think that mail-in voting is a wonderful solution to getting as many people to vote as possible. Because I do think that voting should be as easy as possible, not more difficult. We can already, in Pennsylvania, register to vote online. And given, again, the fact that this area is rural for a good part of it, it certainly makes the whole act of voting a lot easier. And so I'm very much in favor of mail-in ballots. I think that if you look at, even nationally, and a number of states have been doing mail-in ballots for a good long time, that I believe there was a commission established to look at voting fraud that on the national level that actually disbanded for lack of evidence. And so I think that the election boards in these two counties, I think, are very efficient. They're very, I think they're very dedicated to doing a good job. And so I'm, yes, in favor of mail-in ballots. In terms of the delay in normally, I would say I wouldn't see necessarily a reason for it. But when we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months the slowdown in the delivery of mail for various reasons, that it certainly makes sense to allow a little extra time for people to get their ballots, as long as they're postmarked. I do not favor opening them before Election Day, mainly because can have the same effect as watching the returns on election night, where I always feel sort of sorry for the people on Pacific time, because you've got polls closing here in the east and announcing already, in many cases, who's carried the state. And so it can have the effect of people saying, well, why should I bother go vote? Or on the other hand, though, it may impel some people to go out and vote. But I do think that opening them election day, as onerous and as overwhelming as it may well be this year, that we need to wait. And in fact, I'm just trying to remember, I think, talking to somebody at one of the election boards, I think they were excited because they found, they ordered something that will like automatically open the envelopes so that they can just pull the ballots out.
Yeah, I think Snyder County
and
bought
count
some
them.
machines to do that
Yeah,
for them, right?
yeah, and so there are ways to make it a little more efficient.
Okay, so between now and November 3rd, so we're just almost just a tad more than a month away. What are you doing? You're not knocking on doors because of COVID.
That's right.
What are you going to do between now and then to get your name out there for people to recognize who you are and let them know what your policies that you care most about are?
Okay, well, I think your newspaper will help a great deal in publishing the results of this interview. And I am continuing to spend a lot of time on the telephone, and am also going to start trying to do something with some meetings outdoors. Because I do think that at least, as long as the weather cooperates, doing, smaller groups but in larger areas outdoors will become more feasible. And I intend to keep hammering away on the issues and listening. Because I'm finding in dealing with smaller groups, for example, I've been doing Zoom meet and greets, and listening is in some cases more important than hearing me talk, so that I get some idea of whether I'm really understanding what the issues are of the people in the 85th.
Okay, we'll leave it there. We thank you for your time and.
Okay,
we
I see
will-
hand up. I know
wait a minute.
when somebody has a hand up, they have a question. I know that from my teaching days.
Are you debating David Rowe?
At the present time, no one is arranging.
Have you asked for a debate?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, you've planted a seed.
Okay. All right, well then we'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much and good luck.
Okay, thank you very much.